Good afternoon. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. Welcome to our weekly webinar. As you know, we also hold webinars on Thursdays where we focus on a special topic. This Thursday, May 14th at 4 p.m., we hold a virtual census event. Do not miss this event.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, and it might just be me, and I'm about to look like a real fool. Is Yomika's audio skippy for anyone else? All right, just me then. Sorry about that.
Okay, so on May 14th at 4 p.m., we will host a virtual census event. Don't miss this important event, which will highlight the impact of the census and give us all tools to spread the word and increase the response to the census. Special guest moderator on Thursday will be Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren, and our special guest panelists will be Assemblymember Al Taylor, Assemblymember Victor Pichardo, and Senator Zelnor Myrie. We encourage everyone to participate, including any family or community engagement staff, families, and community supporters who can help spread the word about the importance of the census. Billions of dollars are at stake, including Title I funding for schools, money for local communities and community services, and much, much more. If you haven't received the webinar information on the census event already, it is on our website, and you should receive an email reminder soon. Okay, for today's discussion, I am joined today by Susie Corello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at NYSID, Agnelli Matos, Agnelli has a conflict today. We have Aaron Cochran, Managing Director at the New York City Department of Education. And joining us soon will be Randall Eiserman from the New York City Charter School Center. We also have with us today Eric Yurst from the New York City Charter School Center. He and I will talk today a little bit about what's happening with funding and today's call for action to reach out to federal representatives in Congress. There are conversations going on in D.C. right now to determine the next round of federal funding, including whether and how much may be sent to state and local governments. Governor Cuomo has said New York State needs $61 billion to prevent major cuts to education and other programs in New York. Earlier today, he declared that without federal support, the state will have to cut aid to schools and other areas by 20%. New York must balance its budget, so the state cannot spend more money than it has. The federal government, on the other hand, can deficit spend. New York has spent billions fighting COVID, which put a hole in the state budget. Money well spent, and it saved lives. But now we need the federal government to provide funding to help fill this unexpected gap. New York Charter Schools Association and the New York City Charter School Center have teamed up to advocate for federal funding. Eric, welcome. Can you talk about what action schools and their supporters should take this week?
Absolutely. Thank you, Yomika. Thank you, Anna. It's nice to be on with you guys. It's nice to work with you on this. Before we get to the kind of actions, just quickly, the kind of political framework around this is that in the end, we're all not C3, so I'm not advocating for one, but the reality is that the blue states, so to speak, are the ones that have gotten hit hardest and earliest. And so what you're seeing is a real split in Congress and in the Senate, where Washington State, California, New York are all saying, look, we're getting crushed here. We need money to keep ourselves afloat. And what you're seeing on the other side of the aisle is states that haven't been hit as hard, which have been more of the red states. And so there's been this kind of disconnect of the blue states saying we need this now, and very little political upside, frankly, from some of the red states and from the Senate leadership to let this happen now, because their states haven't felt the same effects. Secondarily is we tend to spend more money on services. We tend to spend more money on education, on healthcare. And so the needs are greater here. And all of that is causing a bit of a logjam in Washington. And if you see some of the rhetoric, you know, why should Florida bail out New York, who spends so much of this money and is, you know, mismanaging their books? And of course, it's not a matter of us mismanaging our books. It's that we do spend a lot of money on education, and that we have gotten hit disproportionately from this pandemic than other states have. So that's kind of right now where this is all falling politically, is this this logjam and this the Republicans and Mitch McConnell probably wanting to wait a little bit before they let this happen, so they have some political cover. From the president, probably a New York probably isn't going to go my way in the election. How much value does this really get me? Maybe I should wait out some purple states. So part of what we're looking to do here is keep the pressure on. As I think Yamika said, there is likely going to be some kind of aid package. The size, scope, and timing of it will matter greatly. And what we're asking schools to do, and you probably all got the link this morning, from Yamika, is write to your Congress, to your member of Congress, call your member of Congress, write to the senators, and with a combination of letting them know what the needs are, letting them know how bad these cuts would hit schools and your families. You can have families call in as well. But also keep in mind what this is also partially about is the governor has been for weeks now, for over a month now, has been saying, this really is the ball game. New York State can't print money. New York State cannot deficit spend. States have to balance their budgets. So the ball game kind of moves to Washington, D.C. on this. Now, our members, let's be frank, they're New Yorkers. They're likely to support this. Hakeem Jeffries doesn't need to necessarily be told that your schools need this. However, we know that NYSED is sending out the same messages. We know that UFT is sending out the same messages. This is an opportunity to have your school heard, and to have it heard in such a way that you are not just advocating for your per pupil, you're advocating for families across the state and for the needs of the vulnerable. And so it's a combination of having your folks reach out to them, one, to remind federal officials that you're paying attention, that you're there, you represent constituents, you're part of their community. And it is also to show our governor, who has been a great friend to the charter sector, that we have his back, that he is making a call and we are responding with him and in concert with him. And so that is really that's about all I got to say on it. If there's any questions, I imagine they'll show up on the chat. But again, Anna, Yamika, thank you so much for having me on.
That's great, Eric. Thank you very much for that. I just want to point out that the call to action went out today. I want to point out to everyone, we sent out that email this morning. And today already we have close to 100 people across the state who have taken action. That's awesome. I encourage everyone who's on the phone who hasn't done so already, please take action. As Eric said, please join in the support for federal funding. Join the governor. Shout out for the schools. Thank you. Again, Eric, thank you everyone who participated. Okay, I want to remind everyone, today's webinar will follow the same format as in the past. We will begin by hearing from authorizers, fielding questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Then we'll transition to New York City DOE specific topics and questions. David, Susie, and Aaron, great to be with you on the webinar as always. To start, I want to give you each an opportunity to share any updates from your team and organization.
Thanks, Yumika. I'm checking on my audio, so nod if you can hear me. Excellent. I love the thumbs up. Thank you. Um, we put our little heads together to start off together today, and my understanding is someone is nodding her head, is going to share her screen that's got a little bit of information that we're going to try to share together. And then if there are any questions about individual SUNY things, I'm happy to answer those. I'm starting off today. For those of you that got my SUNY leader emails, I talked last week about H.G. Wells and Doc Brown's DeLorean and Doctor Who's TARDIS, because I wanted to hop in a time machine and travel a year from now and then come back and have all of the answers that we all seek. And it's made me think a lot about Gwendolyn Brooks, who, by the way, was a teacher, a brilliant poet, won the Pulitzer Prize, and a girl from the Midwest. Go ahead, Anna, go ahead and move it to the next slide, if you will. And it made me think about one of my most favorite Gwendolyn Brooks poems, which is titled "One Wants a Teller in a Time Like This." And I'll be quiet for a second and let you read it.
Feels better.
My camera freezes.
So you may know this poem. If you don't, you will thank me, because from now on, you will have the perfect phrase to use in many situations. How to manage your life and wardrobe in a mask. One wants a teller for a time like this. How to squeeze fitness into a day packed with Zoom meetings. One wants a teller at a time like this. How to plan for school reopening. One wants a teller at a time like this. And so we can move ahead to the next slide. One of the ways that we're going to find a good teller is through the survey that has come out to all of the charters in the state. We can move ahead to the next slide. This is just a little definition, but if you'll notice on the first intro to the survey, it very clearly states, here's the reason that we're doing it. The questions in the survey focus on the continuity plans that the state education department talked to us all about doing. So David's going to follow up a little bit on that for us now.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. And so it's important to keep in mind that the questions that we're asking in this survey are very, very similar to the ones that are being asked of district schools. And so there's equity between what we're asking of charters and what's being asked of your district counterparts. Both authorizers were going to, actually, Susie, did you want to cover the genesis of the survey, or did you want me to do that?
Yeah, you go ahead and do that. And that's actually, it's all three of the authorizers. At least two of us were going to. You dive in.
Sure. So, so in talking to Susie, we were really curious about, one, how we were going to tell the story of your schools responding to the current pandemic, but also how are we going to respond to all of the data requests that we were getting, not only from our boards, the SUNY trustees or the Board of Regents, but also for stakeholders like the governor's office, the legislature. And so independently, both us and SUNY we're going to be putting out our own surveys to capture the data regarding your continuity plans so that we can best convey the great work you're doing, to ask for funding, to reach out to our colleagues down in DC and talk about the need here in New York, to piggyback on what Eric was saying as well. As is imperative in any sound survey methodology, both us and SUNY do plan to survey you again in the fall to capture what you've been doing between the first survey and the second, and pivot to what changes end up taking place in the fall of 2020. And so you can go to, yep, there we go. And So we're really happy that we're able to not only partner with us and SUNY, the statewide authorizers, but that we're also in partnership with the New York City Department of Education. We want this data to be as statewide as possible, so that it's coordinated, it's cohesive, we're actually able to ensure that we can derive sector-wide lessons and a sector-wide narrative from the survey and show what smart people are running charters, no matter what the authorizer is, in a really extraordinary time. So Susie, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you, David. And just to underscore, once David and I, kind of both said, oh, we're both doing this together, we were thrilled to have New York City DOE. When we talked to them, they were like, yeah, we're going to ask for all this information too. So we are truly excited. A couple of things that the folks at Credo let us know in terms of tips and tricks on the survey. Only one user can have it open at a given time. There's a specific link set to each school. Once the survey responses are submitted, you can't go back and edit your answers, which is pretty typical. To save your answers in the survey, you have to advance to the next page, and it may be possible that the survey link ended up in spam, so it's worth checking there. I think a couple of the chat questions have indicated, did it go out? Yep, it went out yesterday. If you didn't receive it, you should reach out to your authorizer, and we'll link you up with the folks at Credo to make sure that you do get an opportunity to it. There's a question on here that says if you move ahead a page, when it gets to the submit point, it will not let you go back to the prior question. And there's another question that asks, is that the same survey that you received from Credo? It is. Credo found some philanthropic support in order to be able to do this for the state of New York, which is why we really thank them for their help. And Anna, can you move ahead a slide? So the 3 M's, I understand it's a very short time frame. We really appreciate your assistance in trying to get this done by midnight on Monday, May 18th. Again, if there's a particular issue for any school in terms of being able to complete it in that time frame, reach out to us. We'll link you up with the right folks at Credo to see what we can do. Both David and I, and I'm sure New York City DOE, as David said, are very excited to get all of this information from you, and of course want to be able to report back on our own cohorts of schools to the boards in the regents in New York City DOE. And so the last slide harkens back to Gwendolyn Brooks's poem, One Wants a Teller in a Time Like This. We really appreciate you doing this. We would be asking for this information. We know it's an extra ask that you don't normally get from the authorizers every year. We're going to try to coordinate any additional information that we are going to ask for in the fall associated with whatever annual reports come out, the annual report guidance that David's organization puts out for us every year, so that we are not overburdening you. We appreciate it greatly, and if we all go together and answer these questions, then we in fact will be the tellers in the future. As Eric and Yumika talked about at the beginning, there's a lot of opportunity to show what really smart people are doing for kids and how they're supporting students. And the survey is one way that we can get that message out there to say, here's what's working really well in New York, and here are the challenges we're going to take on in the fall. We are the tellers in a time like this.
Thank you, Susie.
That was great. Thank you very much, Susie. I have two questions. There's two questions to follow up there. One, I just want to clarify. Monday, midnight, Monday, May 18th. That means on May 17th, 11:59, everybody should be prepared to hit send. Is that right? Very good. The other question I have is, what about meeting that deadline to complete the survey? What can schools do if they're worried about meeting that deadline?
If they are worried about meeting that deadline, shoot me an email. And actually, just let me correct, Credo's giving everybody until that Monday at 11:59. I just said midnight for the heck of it. It made the alliteration of the M's much. As a middle girl, I like M alliterations. So it's Monday night at 11:59, Monday the 18th. If you're not going to make it, email us. We'll talk to we'll link you up with the folks at Credo. If you get stuck, we'll link you up with the folks at Credo. We're here to help you help us as a group learn to be the tellers.
All right, great. Before I go on to the next topic, is there anything anybody wants to add? Aaron, David, Susie?
This is, this is going to be used for multiple purposes. It's going to be used for conversations with schools. I would reiterate that school data will not be shared publicly. Certainly your authorizer will speak to you about your school level data, but where the public data will be sector-wide. So where it's both, it's at multiple levels. And this is one of the only initiatives like this in the country. And so in terms of shining attention on the work you're doing, getting resources for New York State, this is a really important tool. It's also a really important tool to help us and help your schools support the students that you're educating. So we think that it's it's worthwhile of your time because it meets so many of the things that we would be doing anyway, as Susie said.
Can I dive in? There are a couple of questions in the Q&A, or do you guys want to manage that, Yumika?
No, that's great, because I was actually going to suggest we break protocol a little bit and answer them now while it's topical. But if you can see them, Susie, and want to field them, that's perfect.
Yeah, so the anonymous typer who said, I've done the survey, it doesn't take very long. Thank you. I tried to approximate the amount of time it would take me trying to think about all of the schools that are open, and it would have been a bad estimate, so I didn't throw it out there. There's a question about, is this an evaluative tool of charters that are used for renewal? No, we're not using this for renewal. This is not an evaluative tool for charters. This is an understanding of we've said this all along. You've made extraordinary pivots. Because you are charter schools, you have made different pivots, many of you, unique to your program, unique to your family. This is not an evaluative tool for renewal. This is a way to capture data, to tell the story of the pivots that you were able to make and the great opportunities that you provided for kids and teachers and what some of those challenges were. And we're going to follow up again in the fall. As I said, we're going to try to do as much as we can in context of other reporting that you already have to do. There's also a question about whether or not you could see all of the items prior to answering them so that you would be prepared to see them. I thought they had sent out a link to the overall set of questions. I'll double check with them just so that you could see, if there's any materials you need to have with you before you're ready to click yourself through the survey.
And if you did not receive the survey, one, your school leader, it would have been the CEO, the head of school. If that person did not receive the survey, reach out to Susie or myself, and we can connect you with our great partners at Credo.
Okay, great. Aaron, before I switch topics, I just want to check in and make sure you don't have anything to add on any of this or want to make a comment about the survey.
Yeah, thank you, Yumika. I was just wanted to add that the DOE is definitely aligned with everything that Susie and David said. We know that taking a survey may not feel like the most value add thing you could be doing for your community right now, but it is definitely going to be extremely valuable information for us as your authorizer, in addition to the storytelling that I think is really going to be beneficial for the sector. So we just want to reiterate that we're very invested in these results, and please definitely reach out to us at charteroversight@schools.nyc.gov if you feel like you haven't gotten your link or if you're having any challenges completing it.
Okay, great. Another topic that we know people are thinking a lot about is related to summer planning and resources. If a school has offered summer resources in the past, whether targeted credit recovery or broader access to programming, what guidance do you all have for them about whether to plan for those, plan to offer those or similar resources this summer? And Erin, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I know that there's probably two layers of questioning, right? Like, so number one, what does it look like for us to provide our summer school programming and to of any kind of building physical programming? What does it look like for distance education? I know that we're still very much waiting on what is happening with buildings this summer. So there, we're just going to share information as soon as we have it. In terms of the distance learning, I think that's for you to answer as you're looking at the needs of your community, and specifically any gaps that you feel you need to be filling. Yeah, so no significant guidance from our end, and I definitely look forward to hearing from Susie and David on any thinking that they've done there as well.
Okay, great. David?
I think one of the great innovative practices that we can glean from our experiences responding to the pandemic are revolutionizing how we provide summer school instruction and how we provide additional interventions for students outside of school time. And so we would encourage you to think about providing summer school through the remote platforms that you've developed as part of your continuity of learning plans. And then regarding online instruction, we don't know what the fall will bring, and so, it's something that you should think about as a contingency. What am I going to do in the fall if I'm in my brick and mortar building? And what am I going to do in the fall if we're not? Similar to your budgeting, you would prepare multiple budgets in times of uncertainty, and you should prepare multiple educational plans. Just a plug in for some of the tools that my office has created, and I'm sure that SUNY and the DOE have similar stuff, but we have a remote monitoring and oversight protocol. And in that protocol, we have a number of questions that we think are important for schools to be thinking about now, not only in your conversations with us as authorizers, but with your school communities. And so certainly check out the questions that we have. It's in the appendix of the document that the link of the document that I just shared, Appendix A, which starts on page 11.
Okay, great. Susie, do you want to add something?
I think they've covered it, except to say, kind of reiterate a little bit about what I talked last week about, and David's document, I'm sure, addresses some of these pieces, which is as you're thinking about summer and the fall, and, again, let me just underscore, we all want to do everything we can to lift up our kiddos when they have had a very different learning experience, which likely doesn't translate into the same acquisition of knowledge and skills. Summer school opportunities, summer support opportunities, and a number of you, I know, are making those available for free sector-wide or nationwide, which is really great. While you're doing that and thinking about the fall, we actually, one of my team spoke today to one of you that we had 4 different scenarios planning in terms of how coming back for the fall. I'm not suggesting that you need 4 different scenarios, but it is the time to be thinking about what things might look like in the fall. And again, I'll underscore, if there are regulatory issues that you think we're going to need to ask for relief from, if there are contractual issues from your charter contract, please start talking with us about that now. I know some of you already have, but we want to be there and supportive of you so that we can aggregate that up and be as impactful as early as possible so we can make good plans for the fall.
Okay, great. So it looks like we've covered all the questions that we got in advance. I'm going to switch it to Anna now to cover any questions that are coming up in the Q&A.
What Most of them were survey questions or will be better served when Randall facilitates questions that are specific to the DOE. I think there's one that that I will call an unfair question that I'll go ahead and ask, but on the topic of summer school, whether or not anyone foresees availability of funding for summer school potentially in a way that is different or above and beyond what has been the case in the past.
Short answer, no.
Thank you. I didn't want to be the only one to burst bubbles by answering questions in the Q&A. So thanks for jumping on.
I'd like to field that for a second. If the federal funding comes, if we send enough letters, if we put enough pressure, how's that?
Very well said, Yamika.
Great. So I think it's probably a good time to hand it over to Randall and Aaron. Randall, I see your name on, so I'm assuming you've gotten on.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. It's good to be here. Unfortunately, Corey is busy today, actually with Angeli, so Aaron and I will step in. There are a couple of things in chat. I don't know if you want to address some of those before we move to anything else. Anna?
I absolutely defer to you and to Aaron.
Okay. Well, because the first question is about 180 days of instruction. If in fact it's not safe to reopen schools in the fall, will online learning instruction count towards that 180 days? How will that work? How will that look? And the second part of that, in a second question, is what would it look like if we have to keep the numbers in our buildings low? Can we use Saturdays and other things towards our 180 days mandates? That may be for all the authorizers to sort of kick back to the real authorities who make those decisions.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the State Education Department, SUNY, are working closely with stakeholders across the state regarding those questions. And we would, unfortunately, in order to waive a requirement or allow for remote instruction to count, would need either an executive order or a change in statute. And so far, we do not have that. However, we know that Governor Cuomo doesn't want to put the cart before the horse. And so it's important that we see how our unpausing of New York goes, how the panels that he's brought together are working, and then we can, as we get closer to the summer, certainly those are conversations that I'm sure will be forthcoming.
Great. Thank you, David. All right, Aaron, I'm sure you're with me. So, yes. Of course, one of the things that's on everybody in the city's mind is there a procedure, is there an update on building access, whether in limited form or in shutdown mode?
Yes, so there are new guidelines for accessing DOE buildings. We sent these guidelines out in the C Weekly this past week. This is for access that is not related to school year closeout, but in order to request this access, there is a form. It did go out in the C Weekly. Thank you so much for folks that have been trying to request that access. It's been alerted to us that the charters were missing from the drop down, so those are being added. So if you were trying to request access via the form, please try again tomorrow. But yeah, so folks need to request access 48 hours in advance of the time that you would like to be in the building, 96 hours in advance if the building is used as a rec. And there are additional guidelines around how many staff can be in the building at the same time.
Seems reasonable in this time when what we're trying to do is keep the number of people in buildings to a minimum. You've already addressed it, but why don't you just some more to make sure everybody hears it, address the question of summer school. Will it be live? Will it be online? And if we aren't sure yet, do we have any ETA on a decision?
Great question. We do not yet know what summer school looks like. It's definitely still in discussions, and I am not aware of a timeline, but I know that they're working on it.
All right. We also know that there has recently been a change of policy with the DOE with regard to using Zoom specifically for related services of students with IEPs. Can you give us a little bit of an update on how families or charter schools access this?
Yes. This also went out in the C-Weekly last week. So the change in policy is that the DOE instance of Zoom is now approved for DOE related service providers to use for teletherapy. Any providers that were using other platforms that they like, they do not need to switch. This is just an increase in options. So all charter students have the ability to have a DOE email. They have it. There's a way to request it. I'm going to pop that, or to access it. It already exists. You just need to get it. I'm going to pop that link in the chat. And so all DOE students have access to the DOE platform of Zoom through their DOE emails, and all charter staff with DOE emails also have access to the DOE platform of Zoom. So I'm going to pop those links in the chat to help folks get that access.
All right. A couple of updates. Specifically, let's go back to access to the building. You may or may not have an answer at the moment because this may require that we have our friends from space planning or DSF talk to us. But do we have any more information about access to a building to undertake a previously approved construction project? Or do we have to, once again, send that back to space planning?
So we are working with facilities to get that clarity. We don't have that answer yet.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about next year. And what are we thinking about will happen for transportation, specifically bus service?
Sure. So one small update to busing, then I think folks may have experience in prior years. So for schools that typically pay for their own bus service for an earlier start, so prior to the DOE calendar, you'll need to contract directly with a busing company instead of going through OPT for any busing needs before the DOE calendar begins. And we'll be providing additional information about September busing as we get closer to that timeline. With regard to Metro cards, currently there is no planned change to Metro card. Early summer cards have been ordered. We're already talking about fall cards.
Okay. One quick question. Obviously, access to buildings, to DOE buildings, does not extend to non-DOE buildings, correct?
For a private space, yeah, we have no control over private space. Yep.
No jurisdiction there. All right, that's what I didn't think so. The DOE has asked for its first day survey to be filled in. When will charter schools know if their start date is okay? That is to say, it works, and they can get some of the services that we rely on from the DOE, such as nursing services and Metro cards and things like that. Is there an ETA for that piece of information?
Great question. So we are working very closely with the other offices that provide these services. And so our next step, once we look at the survey and we see who we need to follow up with, we're going to be passing those desired start dates and different program dates on to those other offices. So like I said, the Metro card team is already moving forward with ordering Metro cards for students. And so we'll be sharing those start dates to give them an indicator of who needs just summer or just September cards versus summer cards. So that type of thing. I want to be clear that we're not quote unquote approving start dates. Clearly there are a lot of dependencies here, but the information that is being provided in the first day of school survey is going to help us provide the information to those other offices to give them the information that they need to be able to best support charters as soon as we do know what is happening with physical school.
Also, just a follow-up to that question, is there a particular process if the first day has to change due to some unforeseen circumstance, how should they make sure that the DOE and related services people know what that is?
So I will say that we're going to be following up with schools this week. If something is changing this week, feel free to take the survey again, and we'll just take the last entry for a given building and interpret that as a change. We are going to be kind of locking the survey to get that information out for their planning. But then we are aware that a lot is going to be changing very rapidly, especially as additional information is coming out. So we are going to have we're developing a process to allow us to more nimbly collect those start dates as we get closer to school actually beginning. So this is more just information collecting to help guide us in these conversations with other offices, and stay tuned for a process to actually let us inform as we're actually going to open doors or whatever that looks like.
Great. Is there an easy link that could be put in the chat for a couple of requests for the form for access to DOE buildings?
Yes, I'll pull that up as we are talking.
All right, good. Then the only other question that's come up now a few times here in the Q&A, which I'm sure we're going to have to kick upstairs, so to speak, is do we have any idea when the DOE calendar will be out?
So we don't have information on that. So we'll definitely see what we can find out there.
All right. Well, that would be a good one for us to maybe be able to touch base on next week, even if it's just to get well, we think it's going to come out at a certain time, but we're not really quite sure. All right. Most of the rest are questions about buildings. There are a couple of questions about expansion of Metro cards or others. Metro cards for students. Assuming bus loads will be smaller, will there be an expansion of Metro cards for students?
In terms of, well, assuming that it's not referring to changes in eligibility, I'm not going to make any assumptions. We are in the very beginning conversations about, and so that's a great flag that number one, we may need to do outreach to families or students who already were eligible, but maybe took other modes of transportation. And number two, there is a policy question around what it means for students that would have ridden the bus, and do they need another option? So that's a great question.
Good one. Thank you very much. And there is a bit of the concern about whether or not we have any idea when the mayor, or if it's a decision the mayor makes, or the governor making a decision on physical reopening. Some schools feel that we're still a long way from actually being able to physically go back into buildings.
Well, I think the governor's been very clear about on the metrics needed to start reopening the state. And we're glad that in parts of the state, like the Mohawk Valley, the Finger Lakes, and the Southern Tier, that they've met the metrics to start unpausing in phase one, heavy industry, construction, et cetera. And the governor and the Department of Health will be closely monitoring those metrics. But definitely tune into the governor's remarks, usually around 11:30 in the morning every day, regarding that, and go from there.
Great, thank you, David. There are a few follow-up questions on the idea of the calendar and getting ready, and I'm going to put them out there because I think they're the kinds of things that we need to begin asking the authorities that will have to give us the answers. And that is there any thinking that the new calendar for the fall for DOE will include a consideration for a combination of blended learning, or whether it will be all in building or some other variation, and whether or not there is some accommodation by the DOE to provide personal protective equipment. Do we know if there's anything like that being considered?
I know that those conversations are happening, but that is all the information we have right now.
Perfectly fair answer. It seems like there's a lot still yet to go through. I think that covers most of what we've had. There are a couple of things that we can answer privately. So I'm going to hand it back to you at this point, Anna.
Oh, I just have one plug, if I may.
Please do.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I just lost my notes. Apologies. Okay. So we just wanted to do a little plug for folks to nominate a charter school hero for the Showcase in the Charter School Weekly. So many of you and your staff are going above and beyond every single day in service of your students and their families. And we just want to put this out there as a great way to acknowledge in a small way the hard work that's happening every day. So if you'd like to nominate a charter school hero to be showcased in the Charter Schools Weekly, the information is available at the top of the C Weekly every week, but you're also welcome to email charterschools@schools.nyc.gov and we can get the nomination form over to you.
Thank you. Well, and in the spirit of shameless plugs, tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock, the Collaborative for Inclusive Education is hosting an online forum all about how do we implement interventions during this period of time, and the ongoing forum discussions hosted by the Charter Center are all available to all of our New York City schools. Take it away, Jamika. Or Anna.
Very good. Thanks. Thank you very much, Randall. Thank you, Aaron. It looks like that wraps up for today. Unless anybody has something else to add, I'll pause for a second just to just get a thumbs up from anybody who wants to add anything. All right, well, looks like we're ready to close out. I want to remind everyone of the census event. Don't miss that on Thursday. Let's get our fair share of that $675 billion, folks. Visit the Action Center, send the letters, call, write, share the information with parents. Let's do this. Thank you. See you Thursday. Have a good night.
Bye.